Welcome back to the studio. In the last video, we got the background all placed and it's really looking pretty. We're ready now to start basing in some of the leaf shapes. For the leaves, I'm going to be making a green that leans just a little bit cooler, so a little bit more blue. And I'm going to be already in this first layer beginning to build in some of the variations and the color shifts that we're going to have in the end. So let's get started painting. Here is our messy palette that we have from painting in the background. And I'm just going to keep using this. If your palette is too messed up, just throw it away, get a new paper plate and start again. I think I'll start again with the palette knife and I'll mix up a green. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I want this green to be a little bit more cool. I want it to be a little bit more on the blue side. I'm gonna squeeze out just a little bit more of the Hansa Yellow Opaque. I can just put it right here. I really like to use just a little bit of paint on the palette. I don't mind having to come back in and re-add some paint, but I'm such a saver and I hate wasting too much. So in the first, I don't think that I talked about the brush that I used on the background. Let me go ahead and grab it out of my water over here. I used a 14 for doing the background, and it's just a nice size, not too big, but for the background where you want some of that sketchy, loose brush stroke, a larger brush is nice. I'm going to, for the leaves, I think I'm going to go ahead and size down to a 10. This brush is well loved. I use it a lot. So let's just go ahead and start to base in our leaves. And actually, thinking maybe before I start, maybe I'll go ahead and mix up some of the pink that we're going to use. So a little bit of the Pyrrole Red. I'm going to put out a little bit of quinacridone magenta. And again, I probably should have shook these before I started. Um, it's one of the things you don't have to do with the heavy body paints. I'll set out just a little bit more of the burnt sienna too. I think that I want to add in some of the variation of the pinks within these leaves as well. So having just a little bit of it mixed up will probably help us. So quinacridone magenta and naphthol red light will give us um, a really nice red color. And then I'll pick up some of the titanium white. I think that that's good enough to get started. I can always add in more of the titanium white as we go. I'll just put a little pile of that over to the side too. Since this leaf is more in the background, I think I'll go ahead and start there. So I'm not worried about going over the edges of any of this. The nice thing about the engraved panel is that you'll be able to see those engraved marks. I just dipped into a little bit more of the phthalo blue just to darken that green. I want it to be pretty dark underneath of these, um, the colored leaves. I forget what the red and pink leaves on the poinsettia are called. I actually looked that up this morning. It's kind of fun to research what you're painting a little bit. Are they called bracts or something like that? So they're really just another variation of a leaf. Okay, in that section, I just based in this leaf that pushes behind some of the other poinsettia leaves that are in front of it. So it's this very same green that we mixed before, just a little bit more of the phthalo and a little bit more of the burnt sienna to darken it. And I hope that you can see that it has some variations. It has some lighter colors. All of those variations really help us as we go forward. I'm going to go ahead and pull out another brush just so I don't have to clean the brush with the green as often. You can certainly clean your brush, but using two brushes is sometimes nice, um, so you don't spend so much time cleaning brushes. And I'm just going to mix up a little bit of a pink color. I added in a little bit of the green just to, again, tone it down a little bit, but I want to add just some hints of some pink coming into these green leaves. And it's going to look a little bit weird when we first start, but just trust the process, just have fun with it. I can come back in and lightly stroke through. I love the variations in the leaves of the poinsettia. I think that the way that the pinks, sometimes even purples and burgundies show through is really fun. So I'm going to leave that one there. We might, as we come in and build in some highlights, it's possible that we'll cover all of that up, and never worry about that. I never mind repainting an area because all of those layers build up so much pretty color that it's never wasted time to come back in and repaint areas if you happen to lose an area. So I'll start on this leaf here, just being a little bit more careful on the edge, but remember, we don't need for it to be perfect. These are hand painted pieces, and all of the little wobbles and inconsistencies will be beautiful in the end. So just try to relax. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't worry about it. Even though this is a kind of a big brush, I can turn it and get in to some of those little areas too. If you go over that engraved line, that's perfectly fine. In fact, going over it a little bit ensures that you cover it. So I'll go back to some of that dark that we had before. So just a little bit more of the phthalo blue, a little bit more of the burnt sienna, and build in some of the dark shape at the top here. I feel like the paint is fighting me just a little bit. It's not, um, creating that dark that I want to here. So if you experience that, just walk away from that, let it dry, move on to a different area, and we'll come back to it. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward as I set in just the base of the remainder of the leaves, and then we'll come back and add some more details to one of them just so that you can see how we can begin to build these shapes. Okay, so that gives us our first layer, just a first look of the basin of the leaves. I'm going to go ahead and move up to this final leaf up here and paint that with you mostly in real time so that you get um, really a step-by-step feel for how these leaves are coming together. Um, I will say that everything on my palette is drying really quickly today. So, it's interesting how that happens sometimes. I don't know, what it is with the weather. I know that in the winter with the heater on and everything, um, that can affect our paints, but that's again another reason why just putting out small bits of paint is really nice. If a little bit dries, we can just put out a little bit more and it's fine. So I'll just start with a basic green, and I'm going to be very loose with letting the colors vary. I know that if you're just starting out painting, it can be a little bit overwhelming to think, oh, I've got to mix that very same color again. And what if I can't? I know I've spent so much time myself feeling that way. But the reality is that the variations are good. Those are the what we want. So I never worry anymore about feeling like I've got to mix that exact color. Embrace those different variations and let some of them happen even from the very first brushstrokes that you're making. So I'll add a little bit more of the phthalo, a little bit more of the burnt sienna to darken it, and begin to add that in right down here where it will be a little bit darker. I don't know what happened to my voice there. So vary the color again on my brush just a little bit. So you can see with very little, it's really fine just as it is. It's beautiful like that. Let's add in a little bit of the pink. Got a little bit too much green still on my brush. Let me dip it in the airbrush medium, blot it out on my towel over here, and get most of that out. I want some of the green just to mute the pink a little bit, just not too much. We'll add just a little bit of the hint of some pink coming into these leaves up here. And then I'll go back into the green again, just a little bit too much pink in my brush. That's really where having two brushes is kind of nice. You don't, fight with too much of one color in your brush. And I need a little bit more of the Hansa Yellow Opaque again. Just a couple more dots. Probably need a little bit more of the burnt sienna too, but let's see. I'm gonna wipe out the brush a little bit. I'm always thinking about controlling the amount of paint that's in my brush. It's one of those things that it's hard to learn, maybe. You just begin to get the feel for how much paint you want in your brush. If you're fighting with how the paint is going down on your piece, then pinch wipe it out your brush just so you have a little bit more control. If I feel like it got too light, I can dip back into the dark again. So it's just very, very loose. I think I am going to come back in. These leaves are beginning to dry some, so I'm going to mix up a lighter version of this sage green that we've been using. Put out a little bit more of the burnt sienna. I'll just drop it right on top of where the burnt sienna was before. Just want a really soft green. This might be too light, but let's try it and see. Yeah, it's just a little too light. I just need a little bit more of the blue, a little bit more of the burnt sienna. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, that's better. I hope that you could see there when I took that first stroke of paint with that color that I mixed, I just touched it to my piece once just to get a feel for what the color was. And then after that, I could make adjustments to that color. It's easy to make the mistake of just continuing to paint with the wrong color. If you touch it to your piece and you feel like it's wrong, go back to your palette and just mix up a little bit more color. I want a darker green. So it's really just about playing back and forth between the colors, letting some variations happen. I want some of those highlights to come in. And this is really where you just want to take your time. Just have fun with it. Um, try some different things. See what you like, what works. I'm going to build up the edge of this one just a little bit with some lighter green. And then I'll wipe that out of my brush and come back in and grab some of the mid green again that we have. And now as I'm coming back in, I'm making sure that I follow the direction of the veins of the leaves. So it always looks a little bit scary when you first lay in that light. It looks like it's too much light. Don't worry about that. Let it be too light if it is, and then come back in and touch into it with your other green mixtures, and you can always settle it in. So I'm going to fast forward and just spend a little bit of time just enjoying painting the leaves. This really is just a time of the painting where you just relax and have fun with it, build up the layers, and it will look beautiful when we get all finished. Okay, I think that I'm going to call these leaves done for now. Um, I really like how they're looking. I like the variation that they have in them. You saw me at the very end of that fast forward clip. Come back in and soften a little bit of this. I don't want it to be too outlined. So I just came in with a mixture of green that we've been using that was not the darkest green, just something that would kind of settle that shadow down. So let's go ahead and work on this top one up here. Again, this is completely optional. It's beautiful as it is, and you don't have to do any more. But I do like to come back in and do a few more layers on the top, more um, thicker paint, more intentional brush strokes, just to build it up a little bit. So that same mixture, Hansa Yellow Opaque, a little bit of the Phthalo Blue, a little bit of the Burnt Sienna, and coming in and just using a little bit more of the brush, a little bit more pressure, letting some of those colors come off. And this goes back to what I mentioned before about never worrying about covering up something that I did before or reworking an area. Generally, when artists get frustrated and think that it's just not going to come together, it's really because they just stopped just moments too soon. If they had just put one more layer on, it probably would have come together perfectly for them. So keep that in mind as you're painting. Just don't give up. Keep going back in, building up colors, vary the color just a little bit. See if I can grab a little bit of titanium white just to lighten it a little bit. A little bit lighter pressure here with those highlights. Now I can wipe out the brush, get my brush mostly clean. I just looked up at how messy my hands are. I make a mess when I paint, and I love it. I love just diving into it. I think that that's good. It's good just the way it is. I think that the only thing I want to do is dip into a little bit more of the burnt sienna and phthalo blue, and I just want to darken it one more time right down here where it really gets into the more the depths of the plant. And while I have that on my brush, I'll use the opportunity to go ahead and walk it around to some of those other areas too. Dip into the airbrush medium, get most of the paint out of my brush, and then just come back in and run along those areas where I just added that darker color. just to soften the edge of that. And since everything else is dry on that leaf, when I come back in, I'm only affecting just what's wet, just that darker shadow color that we just put in. So at this stage, the thing to do really is to move on to the flowered leaves. I need to look that up again. Brox. So the flower, the technical flower, is just these center little buds that come up in the center. The colored leaves are just a variation of the green leaf. I just think that they're so interesting. I just love the color in the leaves. So I do think before we end this video, what I might do is go ahead and touch into that center area with this dark that we mixed. I am going to go ahead and pick up one of my little round brushes, and I will link these here too. If you've watched the other Everyday Art Series classes, you know that I love really cheap brushes. And for 99% of my paintings, whether they're the big 24 by 30 painting or the little pieces, I really just use a filbert set and then a round brush set. So I'm going to dip into the airbrush medium, just wet the bristles of the brush and see if I can get any of the burnt sienna and phthalo blue. It's mostly just burnt sienna and phthalo blue. And I'm just going to tap this color down into the center of these flowers. This will give me a foundation to build on when I come back in and I'm going to add some pinks, some bright pops of yellow down here. I'm going to go ahead and set out just a little bit more burnt sienna. I have a bad habit of getting in a hurry and not just taking the time to set out a little more paint. It's very convenient, especially with the little fluid acrylics. It's so easy just to pop open the lid, put a little bit more paint out rather than struggle with it. So it's nothing specific here, just giving myself a little bit of a darker center so that some of my other elements, when we add them in, will show up. I like it. It looks very pretty. So the next step is just to come back in with the pinks and do the petals of this poinsettia. I am really looking forward to seeing some of the pinks come on this piece. I think that that will really show us how everything else is working. So be watching for that class. All of the classes are in this playlist, and I will make sure that the next class is always linked so that you can easily find the next part.